Christmas. It's the time of the year where your own front door becomes the prettiest sight to see. Welcome back to Shosef's window. And yes, it's that time of the year again. Christmas. It's no exception here in Japan. Places are filled with fun and celebratory mood. After all, it's a heartwarming season, despite the temperature going down. However, it is more like a romantic and commercial activity rather than a religious ceremony here in Japan. Earliest known record of Christmas celebration in Japan dates back to 1552, led by a Spanish missionary. However, the shogun of the time banned Christianity in 1587, including Christmas, and it took centuries until Christianity was finally allowed by the newly established government in the late 1800s during the Meiji Restoration. This is also when Christmas was commercially popularized in Japan. And today, Japanese Christmas is one of the biggest seasonal events in the country, having adopted Western traditions as well as adjusting it to Japan's unique cultural context. I came to the Nakadori Street in Marunouchi, where you can enjoy the Christmas cheer. Despite the fact that less than 1% of the Japanese population is Christian, Christmas has become a popular cultural event over the past century. Essentially, it has a close connection to business, being marketed as a romantic holiday mainly for couples, making a contrast that traditional Japanese festivals like New Year's Days are more centered around family, community, and ancestral worship. So you might ask, how did Christmas come to be where it is today in Japan, and why other Christian events like Easter are not as popular here? Well, to find out, let me open up the window to the history of Christmas in Japan, as well as what it's like today. Shall we? As I mentioned earlier, the first recorded Christmas celebration in Japan can be found in a book called History of Japan, written by a Portuguese missionary named Luís Frois, who came to Japan in 1563. According to this book, this particular occasion of Christmas was led by a Spanish Jesuit, named Cosme de Torres in 1552, who is among the first Westerners to arrive in Japan. Christianity flourished in Japan for a few decades during this time. However, the shogun Toyotomi Hideyoshi eventually learned that Portuguese traders were kidnapping Japanese people for human trafficking, which made him ban the entrance of Portuguese to Japan in 1587. Then the following shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu, restricted foreigners' entrance even further, entirely banning Christianity in 1614. This restriction was very strict. Even Japanese people who came back to Japan as drifters were imprisoned because they might have been to other countries under Christian influences. So the Japanese people at the time were very paranoid about anything foreign. It wasn't until 285 years later when Christianity was officially allowed by the new Japanese government in 1899. It is during this period when Japan began to open up to Western influences, shifting away from centuries of isolation. One of the biggest events was probably the death of the emperor of Taisho era, which coincided with Christmas Day on December 25th in 1926, entering the Showa era, which might explain why Christmas is popular in Japan and not other Western celebrations such as Easter or Thanksgiving. Then the commercialization even pushed the popularity of Christmas. For example, a kabuki theater called Meijiza used Christmas to promote themselves, such as decorating the building with Christmas theme. Also, the tradition of Christmas cake could be traced back to this period as well. The pastry brand Fujiya made Japan's first Christmas cake in 1910. They also sold Christmas cake after World War II in the 1950s. This time, a shortcake with strawberry, which is regarded as the standard form of cake in today's Japan. Oh, and I also found something interesting. So, given the historical resistance towards Christianity still remaining in the late 19th century, people still couldn't openly celebrate Christmas in Japan, but the students of the University of Tokyo got clever about it. Hear me out. So, back in 1879, there was a Christmas party held by the Western professors, and the students wanted to join, but they couldn't. Then the physics students realized that the birthday of Isaac Newton is also December 25th, but in the Julius calendar and not the Gregorian calendar that we use today, and also that day, that time. And they managed to celebrate Christmas with the professors, pretending that they were just cheering for the scientist. And what's even more interesting is that I think this celebration is referred to as Newton Festival or Newton Sai, and it's still celebrated to this day at the university. So it's the tradition of more than 140 years, if I did the math correctly. Now shifting our focus on contemporary Japan, why is fried chicken regarded as Christmas food in Japan? The answer is the same as the Christmas cake. So companies have been using it as their marketing strategies. Business. Surprise. So KFC Japan is known as the first company that used such approach since the 1970s. They positioned fried chicken as a Christmas feast, and there are several theories why they marketed chicken for Christmas, but one explanation goes that Americans eat turkey for Christmas and they replaced it with chicken because turkey isn't widely consumed in Japan. In fact, there are only about 3,000 of turkey being raised annually. And America is it's like the biggest influence on Japan and the world, basically. And given that Japan was defeated by the Americans and got occupied, Americans were like really influential people, and even the culture. I mean, even today, right? Like Hollywood and all the movies, media. So that's one way to understand the Christmas chicken in Japan. And by the way, Japan's first McDonald's opened in 1971. So the 70s was the year of fast food chains in Japan. And another thing about Japanese Christmas is that it is essentially regarded as couple romantic event. I don't know why exactly, but I think it's because there is no romantic event in Japan, like traditionally. So, like traditional celebrations like Obon during summer and New Year's are more family oriented. So I guess we have adopted Christmas as the celebration for love and romance, which we didn't have. It kind of complemented. It's like how Buddhism became popular back in 10th or 9th century Japan. So before Buddhism, there was only Shinto, which is the indigenous religion in Japan. Shinto didn't really talk about after death, like what happens after death. And Buddhism gave really intricate, in depth ideas about what happens after death, which is reincarnation, right? Depending on what you did in your current life, you will be reborn into other realm. That kind of complemented the Japanese people's mind at the time, if that makes sense, because they were basically saying that before Buddhism, they were like, oh, after you die, your soul goes to a mountain or forest or river, and they stay with us. And it was, I guess, too simplistic and not convincing, I guess. I don't know. I'm not from that time, so. Okay, sorry, I digressed. Back to the topic, why Christmas is portrayed as a romantic event. I think the media and entertainment have a lot to do with it. There is a lot of pop songs and movies about Christmas and romance imported from the US. You know, we already have things for our families again, so we just adopted things we don't have, such as Christmas rom-coms and love songs. That's the basic idea. So anyone who is single during Christmas has to find something else to distract themselves from the overwhelming presence of romantic displays. Otherwise, they are casually referred to as kuribocchi. So kuri is the abbreviation of Christmas or Christmas, and bocchi comes from hitoribocchi or being lonely. And kuribocchi people would say Merry Kurushimimasu instead of Merry Christmas, or roughly translated as Merry Suffering, making a pun. But you know, psychologically, making a joke it's like a one way to cooperate with some kind of stress. So it is sad, but in a way you could perceive it as a way to cope with overwhelming singlehood, especially today's Japan. But you know, today's Japan, some people do spend time with their family or friends to celebrate each other's company instead of, you know, religious celebration, especially because of globalism and the cultural mixture. After all, we are living in the 21st century where things are very diverse and everyone has their own ways to spend time. Well, there is a lot of ways to spend one's singlehood, that's for sure. As I showed you, Christmas in Japan has evolved in its own way, being distinct from Western Christmas. And it is a prime example of how Western cultural influences can be adopted and reinterpreted to fit Japanese culture. It's a fascinating blend of the old and new, East and West, I think. It's a true cultural exchange, isn't it? Before I conclude the video, let me share my little bit of insight into the cultural significance of Christmas in Japan. Hear me out, please. Well, in a sense, we could frame the relationship between Christmas and Japanese traditional events in terms of Western individualism versus Japanese collectivism, which complement each other, I think. For example, Christmas in Japan is about pursuing individualistic desires and new relationships with significant other, while more traditional celebrations are to reaffirm one's identity through family bonding, being part of a whole, as a way of self-reflection. Does that make sense? I think there is this balance between outward interest and more inward introspective perspective. So it's like exploring yourself, like who are you? Where do I come from? Well, one of the way to answer that question is, turn to your family and ancestor and going back to the environment you grew up, right? Because that's literally, it's basically part of you. Like when I go back to my family's home and go back to my room, it's like it's not even nostalgic, it's just an extension of myself in a sense. And going to local shrines and maybe see childhood friends. So there's a lot of connection to the past, who you are in the past. While Christmas and the stuff, it's like more oriented towards other, right? You're meeting someone new, exploring new aspects of yourself with someone else. It's kind of like complement each other to create who you are. Does that make sense? You are not just this one thing, but you are shaped through interacting with different people, and you also internalize what you experience through your life. I don't know, that's my perspective, but what do you think? Please let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you like to see more videos from me. Until next year, happy holidays and keep surviving and thriving.